Hare Krishna. This chapter is very interesting, like other chapters, divisions of faith. Krishna is responding to a question of Arjuna. Because if you remember in the 16th chapter, Krishna spoke about something very different. He spoke about the divine and mostly demoniac natures, those who act outside of scriptural regulation. Here Arjuna wants to know, well, what about those people? Okay, they follow the scripture, but they have different motives. They act according to their own ideas. Are they in goodness, passion, and ignorance? And for this, I want everyone to recall chapter 14 and the three modes of material nature, because Krishna's explanation is going to revolve around this. So we start with verse 2, where Krishna says, Trividha bhavati shvadha dehinam sa swabhavaja satviki rajasi chaiva tamasi cheti tachrinu. According to the modes of material nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds, in goodness, passion, and ignorance. Now, hear about this. And Krishna is going to talk about faith in terms of scriptural faith, but faith that relates to the activities that we perform. And you'll find this is very, very interesting. So basically, Krishna will say that according to a person's faith, he will act accordingly. And that faith is determined by one of the three different modes of nature. A person's faith is goodness, or in passion, or in ignorance. And if you remember, goodness means being beautiful, passionate means wanting to really enjoy the result, and ignorance is just that. It's ignorant. So who do people in goodness worship? Well, Krishna says now in verse 4, men in the mode of goodness, they worship higher beings on other planets, demigods. Those in the mode of passion, they worship the aforementioned demons in the 16th chapter, those type of materialistic, atheistic people. By worship doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing different types of worship. They pay homage to them, they follow them, they vote for them. And those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. So that may be something that you have experience with. Some people who worship spirits and ghosts and seance and so on. According to Krishna, this is all in the mode of ignorance. Then, interestingly, Krishna immediately goes to the type of food that people eat, because people have a faith in the food that they eat. They have a certain type of inclination for something, and they have a faith this is something good. So in verse 7, Krishna says, even the food each person prefers is of three kinds, according to the three modes of nature. And the same is said for other things, and he will explain afterwards: sacrifice, austerity, and charity. So what follows now, Krishna will be talking about these four different things, and how faith in these, because faith is the bedrock of anything that we do, determines three different categories of food, sacrifice, austerity, and charity. This is very interesting about food, because we're all eating food. Food dear to those in the mode of goodness. This is food dear in the mode of goodness. Increases duration of life, purifies one's existence, gives strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fat, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Is this the type of food that you eat? Because you are what you eat. And the Subsequent activities, they also will be determined by our consciousness, and our consciousness will be very much influenced by our food. Now, foods that are too bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. Such foods cause distress, misery, and disease. So you can see distress, misery, and disease. Disease is obviously distressful and a source of misery. But the repetition is there because Krishna is pointing out that it also causes psychological problems, and it will cause behavioral problems, and that means it will also cause spiritual problems. That leads to misery. Now, foods prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten that are tasteless, decomposed, and putrid, and food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. Needless to say that this means non-vegetarian foods, as are the foods in the mode of passion. We need to learn how to eat the right type of things. All right, now Krishna spoken about foods. So then he said he was going to speak about sacrifice. All right, so what about sacrifices? Now, he says, sacrifice performed according to Scripture as a matter of duty is of the nature of goodness. This is a characteristic that we see everywhere, that performed out of duty means that it's goodness. So we perform sacrifice, and sacrifice may mean we do our yoga, we do our chanting of mantras, we're doing this for the pleasure of a supreme, but why are we doing it? We're doing it dutiful. And that means sometimes it may feel good, and sometimes it may not feel good. Sometimes we may get a result, or we think that that's the result that we should be getting, and sometimes we don't get the same type of reciprocation. But nonetheless, we do it anyway. Why? Because it's what Scripture says, and Scripture tells us that in the long term, the result will be very beneficial. But not everyone does sacrifice out of a sense of duty. Some people do it for what reason? They do it for material benefit or out of pride. Just see, I also do yoga, I only eat once a day, I do this, I do that, and they're proud. It's an advertised issue, or they want some kind of material benefit. What is that material benefit? Well, if I do yoga, then I'm going to be very slim. That's a material benefit. Or it will, who knows, increase my agility, it will do this and that. These things are all in the mode of passion. And in the mode of ignorance, people who perform sacrifices, they have no regard for the direction of Scripture. They don't distribute sacred food. They don't chant Vedic mantras. They don't give dakshina, or they don't give remuneration to the priests. In other words, to others who are involved. And it really doesn't have any faith. It is without faith. It's meaningless, really. A person doesn't really know why he's doing something, and that is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So this is part 1 of chapter 17, and part 2 we're going to go on to talking about, as I mentioned, austerity, charity, and the other things that are also in the mode of goodness, and that follow the same mold. Hare Krishna.